Tell me right off the top, just a quick question for you, a little quiz. When you first heard about the shootings in Tennessee yesterday and you heard that there were people who were down who were U.S. servicemen as well as a police officer, did you think that perhaps it was a Christian who was doing this? Or B, did you think it was a Jew who was doing this? C, did you think it might possibly be a Hindu who was doing this? Or D, did you think it was a Muslim who was responsible for this shooting? Let me just ask that question again. What was your first thought when you heard this? Did you believe it might be an act of Islamic terrorism? I certainly did. And by the time I got home in the afternoon, I did a little grocery shopping after work. I walked into the house, and I had a quick text message from a friend of mine who was saying they've identified the shooter. Meanwhile, CNN, even after the man's name was released, CNN came on air with an analyst who said, well, we can't necessarily make a judgment that just because his name is Muhammad that he's a Muslim. So we here at the Communist News Network, CNN, are going to have to be very, very careful about what we say because people might get the impression it's not workplace violence, but in fact it's terrorism. 8 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. And again, after the shooting at the Navy Yard a couple of years ago, the question was raised, how come servicemen and women who are actually excellent marksmen, they've trained at it, how come they can't carry firearms on military installations? Because you got some guy who probably his entire experience with shooting is just, firing a few rounds into a tree in the woods. And if these Marines and sailors had actually been able to return fire, this guy would not have lasted long. Let's be honest about that. An old lefty out there jumps up and down because he doesn't trust anyone who wears a military uniform and says, oh, that would be dangerous. Because sometimes those Marines and sailors and airmen and soldiers and coasties, they shoot people. And I read about it in wars. They do that. Yeah. So we've got 4 more people dead, 2 who are wounded. The way the media also says, 5 are dead. Yeah, because one guy deserved to be, okay? 4 innocents are dead. 1 criminal is dead. Let's add it up that way before it's all done. So we knew pretty much early on what was going on here. I understand the journalists had to stand back and wait for the confirmation and all, but in your head, you knew right away who was responsible for this attack. Let's not make any bones about it. And I would suspect that a great many people who call themselves progressives, although they represent no progress, thought exactly the same thing. They were just hoping, though, that it wasn't. They were hoping it was a Tea Party member. They were hoping it happened to be a Christian. They were hoping it happened to be a white supremacist. They were just sitting in their cars as they were listening, rubbing their hands together instead of holding the wheel going, oh, maybe it is, thinking about what sort of gain they could get out of that. Mike Huckabee made an appearance last night with Bill O'Reilly on O'Reilly's program, The O'Reilly Factor on Fox. Take a listen to the former governor of Arkansas, and of course he's also a Baptist minister. Take a listen to some of his remarks.
For reasons that make no sense to me, this administration has been consistent in wanting to do everything to protect the image of Islam. I certainly want to protect the image of peaceful Islam, but we have to recognize that the radical elements of Islam are out to kill us. And it's the same kind of foolish strategy that struck a deal with the Iranians this week. It's the same kind of foolish strategy that picked the wrong side in Egypt, had an imaginary red line in Syria. This administration, for reasons I cannot fully understand, other than just not wanting to offend Muslims, has been so careful not to want to identify the real enemy.
You know what we need to do in order to remedy this? We need to bring 300 of them to the Magic Valley in October, and then perhaps maybe several thousand following that. That'll clear it all up. 8:11, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX at newsradio1310.com. And, of course, you can reach the program today by dialing 736-0300. That's 736-0300. This young man, an emigre, coming here from Kuwait. And wouldn't you know it, he came from a country that we had troops who died to save, to liberate. And yet this is his reward for the U.S. military. This is his response. And it is deadly. It shows you that no matter what you try to do for these people, it is not going to be appreciated. There is a meeting on Monday. The trustees of the College of Southern Idaho, I don't know, I've just concluded that they're all servile personalities and that they're just going along because someone they think is powerful told them they had to go along, or because, like a lot of politicians, and this is when it comes to elective offices, this is just above dog catcher. Can we make that clear? When it comes to elective offices, they'd like to move up because they'd like to have some more respectable office. And they realize that the business people who are benefiting from all of the cheap labor coming in from all of these Islamic countries, and of course from south of the border, from some other countries as well, they realize that they need the backing of these people in the form of campaign contributions if they expect. And when you sit around the Rotary meeting with them, or you're turning a shovel with them, you don't want them to be curt with you because, gosh, they're so important. So they must be right. So we have to back them up. There is a meeting on Monday. The Board of Trustees of the College of Southern Idaho, who also oversee this resettlement program, refugee resettlement program here in the Magic Valley. July 20th, the board meeting takes place in the Taylor Building upstairs on the campus of CSI. It starts promptly at 4 p.m. If everyone, a writer says, who sends this along to me, would challenge CSI trustees to have an evening meeting wherein the employed people could actually attend and dialogue, that would also be good. But if you go early, get there between 3 and 4, sign up to speak, you'll get 3 minutes to make your presentation and let them know how you really feel about this situation, because we are headed toward national and cultural suicide if we continue down this path. Yes, not everyone who comes here is thinking, I'm going to go shoot up a military recruiting station. But enough of them are. And the more of them you bring here, you increase the odds of that happening. Are we blind to that? Or do we just continue to bury our heads in the sand? Well, some people do. I was told yesterday that there were some very liberal clergymen, and I guess women, who showed up. In some churches, they have women who are actually ministers. They showed up and they used biblical injunctions about bringing these people here and loading up the Magic Valley with them. What's interesting is all of the Unitarians and the Presbyterians and the United Methodists and the Episcopalians who always make those arguments, they cherry-pick the Bible. You realize that. That's what they're up to. That's what they do. They stand there and they preen and they tell you you're all wrong and this is what you need to do, and because I dragged this out of Scripture. Well, these are all the churches that also promote same-sex marriage, and were promoting it long before the Supreme Court came along. And why I say they cherry-pick the Bible, I pulled a couple of things down. Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 32. I'm sure they're familiar with that. It basically says, look, if you are engaged in certain types of intercourse, it's a sign of depravity. And that comes in the New Testament, because you'll hear them say, well, we've got to disregard, there's a new covenant now, and all that other stuff doesn't count. Really? Then why is it included in the book? And so I bring that up. I have this from Leviticus 20:13. If a man practices homosexuality, having sex with another man, as with a woman, both men have committed a detestable act, they must both be put to death, for they are guilty of a capital offense. Now, these same pastors who are coming in and speaking on behalf of bringing people here who don't like Christians, we should point out, and who are sworn in many cases to convert Christians at the point of a sword, or to kill you if you don't agree with that conversion, the same people also ignore these types of verses in their own holy book. So their credibility is shot right off the top. Let's mention that. And, bringing people here in large droves may have made sense in 1880, when there was this big wide open country, as long as you were willing to kill the people who were already occupying it. And that's another story for another day. But you could bring people here from all over Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Southern Europe, Northern Europe, and you could bring them in by the boatloads because there was plenty of space where they could go out and they could get 40 acres and they could start growing, or they had to go to work in a factory. The factories were desperately in need of labor, as the country was just booming because of all of the resources it had to exploit at the time. It's different now. Lefty won't admit that. It's different now. He just wants to bring in people so Lefty can get more votes, so they can have more social welfare programs, which they think are the key or the remedy to everything, just like their heroes in Greece have done. Washington Examiner. Paul Bedard writing, Federal Reserve blames immigrant kids for robbing jobs from native U.S. teens. Hello? There just simply isn't enough work here for all the people who are already here, many of whom have had families here for, 8, 9, 10, 12 generations. American teen employment has dropped 20% from the late 1980s, in part because more and more immigrants have flooded into the market to displace native-born kids from jobs in percentages far higher than non-adults, according to the Federal Reserve. When I was getting ready to go to college, I took a job in high school. I worked, scrimped, and I saved, and I continued to work through college. And when I got out of college, I owed very, very little money. I mean, it was just a tiny little amount that I had borrowed to go to school. Why? Because a job was available. And in fact, all over town, I could go to a grocery store, a restaurant, the local hospital, and kids were being hired left and right. It wasn't who had a job. We all did. It was where you worked at the time. Now, because of this, and they talk about how we have to be sympathetic and we have to be nice. What about our own dang children then? Next time you see some Unitarian minister and his boyfriend trying to tell you that we've got to be nice about these things, maybe it's time you ask them how you're going to pay for your kid's college education without going into debt and perhaps, dying in penury because of that. Maybe you need to bring that up. Ask them how about the sympathy for our own children, our own children who are struggling to get by and who will be saddled with this debt yoked around their necks for the rest of their lives. The Fed report is the second, Mr. Bedard writes, to blame immigrants for taking jobs native teens would normally fill, and come as new media reports show teen employment down this year. And it's pretty much been on a downward trend for 25 years. Most of those media reports don't cite immigration as a cause or even cite last year's surge of over 70,000 illegal youths crossing over the U.S.-Mexico border. Here's a quote. It's frustratingly common the mainstream media discusses a social problem obviously impacted by immigration, overcrowding, low wages, increasing poverty, etc., but assiduously avoids any mention of immigration, unquote. That comes from the Center for Immigration Studies. We're going to be talking a little bit about illegal immigrants a little later in the program. Maria Espinoza is joining us. Her father is a legal immigrant from Mexico. She is a native of Texas, and she says it's time to boycott sanctuary cities, and specifically, the one to start with, San Francisco, California, which allows bloodthirsty criminals to roam the streets and shoot down innocent young women at random. We have a lot to talk about today. It is difficult to contain what I find is people say, well, we're angry. Well, we're angry for all the right reasons. Let's be honest about that. What we are seeing are these people and the useful idiots chipping away at our culture and our country and everything we hold dear, and it's dang well time we started doing something about it. Bill Colley with you this morning, 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, 62 at our studios. Well, outdoors. Inside, who knows? It's gotten awfully hot in this room, I can tell you that.